Hello and welcome everyone to today's National AI Centre webinar. I'm Eloise Lever and I lead the industry growth team at the National AI Centre, where we deliver a range of initiatives to support Australia's growing AI ecosystem. We aim to spotlight AI capability and adoption across the country and build confidence in responsible AI use and support Australian organisations, including small and medium enterprises, to accelerate their AI adoption. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today and for giving us your attention at a time when I'm sure all of you have a lot going on. We're thrilled to have you with us as we explore today's topic, which is Australia's growing AI ecosystem. And we'll hear from our guest speaker, Stefan Hajkowicz, the author of our latest ecosystem report. But we're also looking forward to hearing from you all today. These webinars are designed to be interactive, so I'm going to encourage you to submit your comments and questions in the Q&A throughout Stefan's presentation, and we'll make the time at the end of the presentation to discuss your questions. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're all joining from today. I'm speaking to you from Kaurna country in South Australia, which encompasses the area of the Adelaide Plains. I would like to acknowledge the First Nations peoples as the traditional custodians of the oldest living culture and pay respects to their elders past and present. And I'd also like to welcome and pay my respects to any First Nations peoples that we have at our webinar today. Now, before I dive into the presentation, into introducing Stefan, I'd just like to briefly introduce the National AI Centre. We were established in 2021 to support the responsible adoption of AI across Australia's SMEs. Our role's expanded and our vision now is to support Australia to become a global leader in developing and adopting trusted, secure and responsible AI. We aim to build confidence, capability and clarity in AI adoption, and this includes delivering best practice guidance to those that are developing and adopting AI, and also building AI literacy in Australia. We offer a range of resources and we deliver programs and activities to support this mission. One of our key resources up on screen there is our voluntary AI safety standard that was released last year. It's a comprehensive best practice guide for deploying AI safely and responsibly in your organisation. So I do encourage you all to take a look at that. Building on the voluntary AI safety standard, we're actually now developing a new suite of industry guidance, which will be released soon. This will include extending the guidance to AI developers and also delivering simplified fit-for-purpose tools and resources to support the responsible adoption of AI for business. So yesterday, the latest Responsible AI Index and Self-Assessment tool was released by Fifth Quadrant in collaboration with the National AI Centre. So this index tracks how organisations are using responsible AI practices across 5 key dimensions. And organisations can actually now assess their maturity and benchmark against their peers and get tailored guidance for improvement via the new self-assessment tool. So I encourage you all to go and have a look at that. I'd also like to quickly draw your attention to some other resources we've launched recently. So the AI Directory is a growing network of Australian businesses and other organisations with AI capabilities. So I encourage you to explore the directory if you're looking for an AI solution. You can filter it by industry, by state, by type of AI technology and business area. But if you're a business or an organisation that has AI capability, please register to be listed on our directory. We have over 340 listed. We have a number in review at the moment and we're receiving applications all the time. So I'd love to see as many as possible on our Australian directory. So I would also like to tell you about our newly launched National AI event calendar, where you can find AI-related events happening across Australia. So you can search for events near you or online, but if your organisation is actually hosting an AI event, you can register it on our calendar and get exposure for your event. from time to time, we'll be sharing out events via our National AI Centre socials as well. But today's webinar, we're going to hear from Stefan Hajkowicz. I just want to mention that you may have also been expecting to hear from our NAIC Director, Lee Hicken, today. Unfortunately, was unable to attend at the last moment, and we do appreciate your understanding there, but rest assured there'll be plenty more opportunities to hear from Lee in the future. So I'm delighted to be handing over to Stefan. Stefan is one of the lead authors who I had the privilege of working closely with on this report, alongside his co-author, Alexandra Bratanova, whose contributions I'd also like to acknowledge today. It was an enormous effort untangling this complex data into a readable report. It was a real team effort across CSIRO and the National AI Centre, and I'm really excited for you all to hear directly from Stefan today. So over to you. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Eloise. I will now just take control of the presentation. Okay, so I'm Stefan Hajkowicz. I'm a Chief Research Consultant at CSIRO's Data 61, working heavily in the space of artificial intelligence. I am an in-resident in some Australian corporations on AI strategy, and I help the companies build their strategy on AI, and a lot of that is about selecting use cases and prioritising those use cases. But I also do a lot of policy work on artificial intelligence with Australian governments about how it can be done well, responsibly, and increasingly where to invest to achieve AI capability and more lately sovereign capability. I started my AI journey seriously in around 2017 or 2018. When we were asked to write the national roadmap on artificial intelligence, and I also wrote the ethics framework, which was translated into a set of principles guiding the ethical development of AI on the Australian government website. But this is a body of work that I've been doing with Eloise and the team at NAIC for some time, and along with my colleague, Dr. Alexandra Bratanova. We did the previous AI ecosystem report, and this is the next version. And the purpose of the ecosystem report is really to capture all our companies, capabilities, skills, what's happening in the labour market and jobs demand for artificial intelligence, what type of companies and how our local industry is growing, where it's happening, what sort of clusters and hotspots are forming in Australia's AI industries. And we also have a section in there looking at the research specializations, examining research publishing in refereed journals, but also intellectual property patents from Australian companies and research institutes to get a sense of where is Australia specialising in AI. Now, in today's presentation, I want to do two things. I want to really open with a bit of a view of what's happening globally on AI. So this is not the ecosystem report yet. There'll be a couple of slides first. I just want to share what we're seeing in artificial intelligence and the sort of information we're typically sharing with company boards and leadership teams from government about interested in AI adoption. So I mentioned briefly the suite of reports that I've worked on since 2019. This is the second most recent one on the ecosystem. We'll also be soon doing another webinar on an AI investment playbook. Basically, overall, we've seen this boom of investment in artificial intelligence across the globe. This is global data, but you can see that there's been a huge amount of growth in AI, but in generative AI even more so. And I expect subsequent years of data to continue to show that generative AI boost continuing. But you can see a sudden jump there in the blue graph, the smaller graph there, from the years 2022 to 2023, as there was a surge in investment in generative AI. Tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Claude, and so forth. We're also seeing a pretty significant restructure in the tech sector. There is a blue line that goes against these red lines, which is with new jobs being created, which we don't have data on. And I think it is significant. And talking to some executives within the tech corporations recently, at the same time they're reducing staff, they're also increasing staff significantly. They're doing this. But what is happening is that AI is causing a structural change in the technology sector globally. You can see how, as we saw GitHub Copilot released, OpenAI's release of GPT, we saw a big shift as coding was done increasingly with AI tools, and the nature of the investment being made by these companies changed. And then we're seeing also some really big shifts. Like when we did the roadmap back in 2020, our feeling was that it would go through a hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle. We would see it expand, then come down again and plateau. But that come down again thing doesn't seem to be yet happening. This push globally on generative AI is huge. And we're working with a South Korean company, Naver, which is the South Korean Google, and they're really pushing quite hard for South Korea to be a third option after China in the US for AI models. But they just made this announcement only recently of an investment at the national level with public and private sector money going into it of 1.132 trillion Australian dollars, effectively betting the whole economy of South Korea on it. So we're seeing moves in the global community that are like this, that this AI phenomena is not just temporary. It's not it. This is a really big shift into a new space, into new economic territory, and I think that is true. They say 80% of what you hear on AI is hype. The 20% that isn't is enough to change your world forever. And I think we are seeing in the technology sector, but it's going to creep into other parts of the economy, a really more broader structural shift. Now, a lot of that shift is possible because of this breakthrough by Google back in 2017. Google researchers developed the generative pre-trained transformer, which was a much more efficient way of doing machine learning within the context of a deep neural network. It basically pointed the machine learning algorithm to the data and information that mattered most in predicting the outcome. And that really sped it up and improved what's possible. And that's why we have these tools at our fingertip, which I keep on needing to update because the model updates keep coming out. But we've seen the emergence of these foundation models, and a lot of these are large language models, some of them multimodal, trained on video and audio and images as well. But they are all on the transformer architecture, and they're all leveraging that framework within deep neural networks to be where they're trained on masses of data and then start solving wide-ranging downstream tasks. But it's worth pointing out that whilst we have these tools and we're familiar with them, and I'm a big user of some of these tools of Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT, but the Copilot Mistral is a really strong tool from France. Grok 3 is recently has just hit some huge benchmarks. It's from Elon Musk and X. And China's models, DeepSeek R1 and Qwen 2.5, are really powerful models too. DeepSeek was fascinating to a lot of us because for only $6 million US of GPU time, they were able to build a model which had performance up there with the top 5 in the world. And that was they used a technique called reinforcement learning, which showed us what was possible. But it's not just large language models. The era of foundation models is upon us. There's the global AI supply chain is in production mode. And I like to just say that these AI foundation models are like brains that are being built. They're trained on masses of data, and then they perform quite wide-ranging tasks. And the capability of these brains is getting better and better. And overall, the number of foundation models globally is around 330. But this includes geospatial models, or models trained on things like, in this case, Google's GenCast system is a foundation model, but it's for weather forecasting. So it doesn't have any language data in it. It just has crazy amounts of meteorological and climate data put into it so that it can do forecasts up to the 15-day period. And it was published in Nature in January this year. Where they found it did better predictions on 97.2% of 1,320 weather forecasting targets within that 15-day period than the world's best capabilities existing, which is widely seen to be the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. So it kind of won, and it is proving that AI foundation models and AI modelling approaches can almost outperform some of the physics informed and the models which rely on meteorology to do forecasting. And that's an interesting shift in how we do it. But it's worth pointing out that we're familiar with tools like ChatGPT, but there's a bunch more happening in the world of foundation models. There's geospatial ones being developed as well that are starting to change industry and how things work. And it's also finding its way into the physical world. These AI tools that we use on our desktop won't just be limited to the desktop. They're changing what's possible for the world of robotics. And the world of robotics is really merging with the world of AI. We see sort of the holy grail in robotics is the development of a robot with capabilities to take generalized human language instructions and then use reasoning to understand what it's looking at in the real world, how to interact with it, and create its own plan of attack about how to achieve the task. So Google DeepMind has leveraged Gemini 2.0 to develop Gemini Robotics, foundational model where you can ask it to, put the coffee cup in the dishwasher. It works out which is the coffee cup, what's a dishwasher, how to put it in there, and it's able to combine that reasoning with physical real-world actions. NVIDIA Groot N1 is another example of this, which is a humanoid robot. And I've talked to recently colleagues in the robotic space, and there is some logic about building humanoid robots because the world is made for humans because we made it, and a human shape isn't too bad for achieving a lot of the things that a robotic device needs to do. But it's not the only form. Benchmarks are getting hit pretty quickly, faster than we think for a lot of things, such as image classification, visual reasoning, visual common sense reasoning, multitask language understanding, and competition level mathematics, thanks to the reinforcement learning approaches, because a lot of STEM problems are ones where there's a correct answer and an incorrect answer, and those sorts of problems, we can use reinforcement learning approaches to really quickly train up the capabilities of the AI model, and that's certainly happening. And scaling laws are continuing. So the scaling laws basically tell us an exponential increase in investment into compute power, the amount of data and the amount of parameters the model handles leads to a linear improvement in intelligence. And because intelligence is so valuable, that's an equation that's likely to keep going for some time. This is why we're sort of seeing, announced from the United States a $500 billion investment into training capabilities for ChatGPT and OpenAI. So it's happening across different sectors, academia, government, industry, but the bulk is, if you look into that graph, the pink dots, which are in industry, are where bulk of it is occurring globally. And then how good is it all going to get? This is an interesting question, and colleagues of mine in the AI community will routinely say they refuse to ever try and predict anything about the future of AI. My belief is we don't quite have that luxury because we're advising companies and governments about investing in AI today. We have to have a sense of where it's headed. This group, Epoch AI, which is a group of scientists from across the United States predominantly, have this challenge of understanding the future trajectory of artificial intelligence. They're cited in the Stanford University AI Index report and seem to be pretty credible. Bottom line is, when they analyzed it, they came to this conclusion that they said we might see advances in AI by the end of the decade as major as what we have experienced since the beginning of the decade. So what we saw from 2020 to 2025, we might see the same level of progress out to 2030. So that's pretty significant. If we look at what happened from GPT-2 to GPT-5 that we're currently using, that's a huge difference in capability. If that is to be replicated again out to another future product such as GPT-7 or 8, we would expect that. And I should point out all of the foundational modeling capabilities, just by the scaling laws, this is not by inventing new stuff, to be significantly more capable and improved performing various tasks. So that's quite an interesting thing, but it's got to be stressed that's a plausible future, not a definite future, but is what is so fascinating about this world of AI. When we wrote the roadmap in 2019, we totally underestimated how good AI was going to get and how widespread its use would be. And humanity's last exam is one of the toughest benchmarks for artificial intelligence models to test their intelligence and reasoning. It's not 20% correct anymore. It's actually 40% because Grok just hit 40% on humanity's last exam. And the people who designed the humanity last exam benchmark reckon it could be closer to 50% by the end of the year. And at the beginning of the year, it was only 3%. So that's an incredibly tough benchmark of some 2,500 really complex questions that require reasoning and logic that are just simply put to the AI tools. And their capability is performing against that is improving. Most of these models, the foundation models, are not being built in Australia. Most of them being built, the vast majority come out of the United States and China. I think it's something like 60-70% out of US, maybe 10 to 20% out of China, and then Europe, Canada are significant players as well, and South Korea. But then it starts to fall off. Japan is also pretty significant. but it falls off pretty quickly. And this is what causes a lot of the discussions about sovereign capability. There's a huge discussion going on right now, the Economic Roundtable last week, about AI and productivity, and I think we're going to hear a lot more in that space. Controlled studies tend to give us results like this if we have a group of professionals in a lot of different fields: management consulting, programming, customer sales, for example, customer support staff. We tend to find the ones that have AI perform their jobs better and quicker using it than the ones that don't. In the case of software engineers, 56% quicker is roughly the norm of what's being reported. But the trick is, and where I think is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for Australia with AI right now, while we see these controlled studies doing it, we have this issue that it certainly is not adding up to productivity gains at the industry level, at the state, or at the national levels. We're still seeing our productivity decline. And as I advise boards, I tend to say, there's not this simple AI button we're going to be pushing to get the benefits of AI. A recent MIT study, actually, the RAND Corporation and Queensland University of Technology found that AI projects inside large organisations typically fail at 80%. So 80% of them aren't delivering what they wanted. But an MIT study that just came out found that for the category of generative AI, it's actually 95%. So we're seeing these crazy high failure rates of AI projects. And that's because, yes, in a controlled study with the right sort of conditions, it outperforms, but in the real messy world that it's getting dropped into, no, it's not clear. And then why does it not work? It's not actually the tech that didn't work as much. It can be that, and that's relevant. But the big reasons are using AI to solve the wrong problem in the first place. And that's what motivated me and Professor Eleanor Huntington out of CSIRO to write the AI investment playbook. How do you choose what to invest in AI? And that's our next webinar. But it's also about the data sets that you needed to train or adapt the AI model with there. There was a focus on tech and gadgets, not business problems, lack of infrastructure. But I'd say the other studies also point towards huge business integration issues that we haven't worked out how to drop this thing called AI into the business. So that's just a bit of a background about sort of what we're thinking about, what we're solving, and what I think is the challenge. I think the big challenge for Australia is wrapping this layer of AI across the economy and turning it into productivity better, faster. And that's huge. It's turning out to be hugely challenging. So let's get into the ecosystem report. What does our AI industry actually look like? The report was published June this year, and it was fantastic to work with Eloise and the team at NAIC, who we rolled our sleeves up and just trawled through enormous amounts of data, complex definitional issues. It's interesting. We've also had the team from the New Zealand government who wrote their AI ecosystem report has reached out. I've got a meeting with them on Friday to share what we learned and thought and found out from that. But they're on a similar pathway, and they've mapped out their ecosystem and I think using some sort of similar approaches. So it's not, and Canada put out an ecosystem report as well. So we're not the only ones that does do this. Why do we do it? It's so that we understand our specializations. Where is Australia strong? Where do we invest in building this? What's our comparative advantage compared to the rest of the world? What are the skills and capabilities we've got? How is our industry taking shape? What are the policy levers that we can apply to make it, to fast track it and grow it quickly? What are the skill sets people, workers need to get into this space? Those are some of the reasons we're doing it. So let's start in the first part of the analysis was about companies. So an AI company, in our definition, is a company in Australia. It can be a startup or a large, well advanced company. We have both in here. So medium to startup, medium through to large companies. And that company, as an AI company, the primary thing they're creating is AI products and services. They might be creating AI-enabled software. They might be providing specific advice to other companies on how to adopt and use AI, but their raison d'etre is an AI. So they're not just a company that's using AI, they're a company who's producing AI products and services. What we did find interesting, and Eloise can explore this with us, is we had the first issue was, well, so many companies use AI so much. If we look into the IT sector, it's kind of hard to find a company that isn't doing a hell of a lot with AI by now. And my guess is when we write the next ecosystem report, we're going to have to think of a different way of defining it, because we're going to struggle to find companies that aren't doing a bunch of stuff with AI. But that was the definition we used this time. And we then looked into databases like Crunchbase. We used LinkedIn. PitchBook was another one. and web-based analysis. And we also had job advertisement data to look at companies that were recruiting a lot of AI specialists to be able to work out like if they're likely to be an AI company. Then we did all sorts of keyword chests, natural language processing on the information from the company to then get it into, and it was a pretty high bar to say, yeah, you are an AI company. However, at the end of the day, I still said to Eloise, let's call it a sample because we're sure there's more than what we found. And it's such a fluid space, we're going to see more created. Interestingly, when we did this in, I think it was 2023, we identified 500 companies by this approach. In this time, we tightened the criteria and we came up with 1,500 companies. So it's more than times 3. So Australia's AI ecosystem is alive and well, it's growing, and it's getting its characteristics as I'll describe. It included 1,121 private companies and 412 listed on the ASX or NASDAQ, and it might have been a couple of other stock markets, but large companies like Atlassian would definitely be in this because they're just doing so much with AI. But they are listed, for example, on the NASDAQ, but they're still considered an Australian company. To be an Australian company, you had to have your headquarters here, basically, to be in the list, because we're not including the global tech corporations who have outposts in Australia. We're really interested in the more Australian-grown ones here, who have, this is where their home base is. So we also had some definitional issues there. What do they do? A lot of Australia's AI sector is about improving the ability of other businesses to adopt and use and get value out of AI, and we would expect that, and we're starting to see it grow. Business processes and support services is the big thing, where all these AI brains that I talked about, the foundation models, they're building software interfaces and tools and doing all the thinking and work to help businesses actually use them in their processes. IT infrastructure and hosting, like cloud centers and data centers. Obviously, anyone looking at the AI sector knows the data center industry is booming, and there's a huge amount of investment wanting to come into Australia to build data centers. It's an opportunity, but obviously one that we want to manage. Media and social platforms marketing was another really interesting area of AI company application. I'll talk a bit more, but we found a whole lot of them actually setting up in Maroochydore on the Sunshine Coast. Healthcare, drugs, digital security, and then look, I won't go through the whole list, and you can certainly look at it online, but you can get a bit of a sense of the industries that the AI companies we identified are actually working in here. Next thing to cover is clustering. So my PhD was in economic geography, and I worked in geographic information, so I tend to map things. And this was on the first ecosystem report. I did map where all these companies were. So we got the company, we determined the address by doing online searching, again with natural language processing, to work out the headquarter address of the company, and then we use Google tools to turn that to geocode that, to turn that address into a latitude and longitude. So we get roughly 1,500 points on the map, and we found clustering. It shouldn't surprise us, because this is the way AI and tech industries grow globally. It's the same thing is going on here. I'm highly confident with it, and this place-based angle, I think, is going to be one of the more significant policy interventions, and what are the policy levers government can apply where it's happening gets really important. So let's look at Silicon Valley, California. A Harvard University study indicates that with only 2.5% of the US population, the San Francisco metropolitan area, what we call Silicon Valley, attracts 48.1% of venture capital investment for the whole US, 18.4% of patents granted, and 11.7% of employment in top R&D industries. So it's insanely concentrated in a very small space, and anyone in the investment game knows that you want a Silicon Valley address to attract investment. It absolutely works. You can try the same firm in a lot of places and then set it up in Silicon Valley, and it works. So something is definitely going on there. Cambridge, United Kingdom, another really highly concentrated cluster at the Silicon Fen what's called Silicon Fen in the Cambridge region. Saw the number of technology firms grow from around 50 in the 60s to over 1,200 firms employing 36,000 workers by the year 2000. And it had some really big multi-billion-dollar tech firms that over the last decade or so have emerged and grown on to do other things. But again, a highly spatially concentrated tech industry. And then Toulouse in France, this is a bit different. It's an aerospace cluster, but again, we see this part of France, a bit like Seattle in the United States too, but highly specialized on a particular aspect of technology. So I don't want to get too far away into the geography of it all, other than to say, it's happening. There's Tech Central in Sydney, which is probably one of our main clusters. We've done a more broader study on the digital economy more generally, and we found, these are the really big tech concentrations in Australia's main cities, what we call the Sydney Arc, the Melbourne Diamond, the Brisbane Corridor, the Canberra Triangle. So what about AI companies specifically? So if we get the 1,500 AI companies and we map them, we found that 858 or 68% of them were of the 1,500 companies. So 68% of the 1,500 companies, roughly 860, were inside what we would deem to be a cluster. How do we determine a cluster? We used an unsupervised machine learning method called DB scan, which we don't actually tell it what a cluster is. It just looks at all the dots on maps and says, is there a lot of dots close together that is statistically significantly different to how they would normally be spread and very far away from random, and it then determines that cluster. So it's the AI algorithm determining, based on statistical rules here, determining where a cluster exists. So it's an important point, is that we're not trying to look at maps and guess where clusters is. This is the data telling us that there's so many points closely together here. This can't be random. And we found 25 distinct clusters, and these are the top 10 clusters by company count, so the number of companies per cluster. The Melbourne cluster is the biggest one, single one. It's worth pointing out that Sydney was about 3 clusters. If you add them together, it's larger than the Melbourne one, but they were 3 clusters in different parts of Sydney. Then we had the Brisbane CBD cluster, which was at 114 companies in it. Sydney Martin Place at 53 with a pretty strong law tech focus. Adelaide, 51, North Sydney. You can see there's Haymarket, Sydney. There were a lot of Sydney ones. So even though we don't get the single big Sydney cluster, it's partly because there's so much going on in Sydney. We've got intra-Sydney specialisation and clustering happening. What we also looked at was the specialisation of the clusters, and to do this, we calculated something called the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, HHI index. Like basically, what that's telling you is higher numbers mean more specialised on one thing. So a very high number for that means the cluster is highly specialised on one industry, and a low number means it's diversified and doing a lot of different things. So what were the specialised ones? Well, we found West Perth was all about mining and energy, as you probably would expect. Even if you look at ASX companies, there's so many mining companies in Perth headquartered there, but AI is certainly following that trend, and our emerging tech industry of AI is following our traditional industries. Maroochydore is an interesting one, I think, largely due to the lifestyle aspects of the Sunshine Coast. Maroochydore is a beautiful spot on the coast, but we found a high level of specialization on social media applications of AI. So these are all the AI tools that read social media, that analyze social media to try and summarize what's being said or post information up onto social media for marketing purposes. But that is starting to happen on Maroochydore, and it's a really significant part of our AI industry. Canberra, we found high level of specialization in the space of security predominantly, but also in administrative services, which is what you would expect around government agencies. We can go down the list further, but what I am confident is happening here is there's geographic specialization of clusters that are forming, tends to attract the more social media companies in AI that set up in the Sunshine Coast, the more they get benefits of working with each other, interacting, meeting at coffee shops and collaborating, and those human in-person interactions still really matter in the formation of our tech industry. So that's the Maroochydore one is also interesting because it wasn't completely an accident. This was a priority development area for over a decade for the Queensland government, that they purposely wanted to build this, and they purposely wanted, as part of that priority development area, to grow the tech industry, and you can see evidence of it happening. Now let's jump on to research specializations and research trends. And first of all, we'll look at patents. So intellectual property patents are something if you discover something, you want to protect it, you'll take out a patent. And the first thing I'll say is that it's a significant aspect of product innovation, but not everything. Studies tend to suggest between 30 to 40% of all product innovation and going out there is captured in the patent system. It's declined over time. A lot of entrepreneurs are out there developing commercial products, but they're not filing a patent. So we need to note that this isn't everything. This is a sample of a broader product commercialization pattern. We also limited our data for Australia. You can get for patents, you can get the address of the applicant, the jurisdiction, or the inventor. We limited these Australian patents just to the inventor. We wanted to know about stuff that Australians were inventing and creating if we do it by jurisdiction, we tend to get large tech corporations like Samsung and so forth who've taken out patents to protect their technology that's been developed globally to protect it in Australia. And that's not really what we're after in this report, because we want to know what Australians are inventing. And sometimes those global companies that take out patents to protect AI tech here, they actually limit the Australian ecosystem a bit, because if you're an inventor of that same tech in Australia, you've got to navigate that patent. And it's a known issue with the patenting officers. Some patenting officers are quite biased in terms of protecting their own industry. Ours is fairly open, but there's pros and cons there. So this is an Australian inventor. So what's going on in this? Well, the bottom left just shows us the AI patent volume. So Australians have been inventing a lot more AI patents over time. They've been putting product innovation has gone up, and as a percentage of total patenting, it's also gone up. So a lot more about total patents coming out of Australia is about AI. How did we do this? We examined all of the descriptions of the patents for AI terms and had a procedure to determine, yes, this is referring to AI in the right ways and sufficiently to be considered an AI patent. Over time, our share of global patents in the field of artificial intelligence has fallen. It was a fairly small number, but it's fallen. But that's largely due to the fact that not us, what you can see in the graphs, it's not because we're doing less, it's because the world has massively expanded and is doing way more. And we can see that overall patent volumes have fallen for Australia. So Australians are doing fewer and fewer patents overall, but the AI patents inside them are increasing. So this graph should say publishing. So now we're on to publishing. So we've looked at patents. Now this is, I know it says patents there. We should say this is publishing trends from 2015. So this is refereed journal papers predominantly, but also conference papers by Australian authors on artificial intelligence. And by memory, we find, there's something in the ballpark of around 100,000 or so papers over that 10-year period would have come out from Australian authors. And again, we've examined the abstracts and the titles and the keywords of this paper to determine if it's an artificial intelligence paper. So artificial intelligence is increasingly colouring the publication output of our predominantly university and research sector. But I should also note, industry publishing absolutely happens in the space of AI quite a lot. There's companies out there whose staff are publishing on AI too. So it's not just universities and research institutes, although it's heavily coloured by them. The number of AI publications has risen sharply. Everything was impacted in publishing in the COVID period. As you can see, during COVID, publication rates went down, but our share of global AI research publications has plummeted. That is, again, not due to the fact we're doing less of it. It's just there's been this massive explosion globally in AI. The global research community has just picked up AI like nothing before since the last 10 years and has grown really quickly into the space. We also examined the specializations that might be happening, like what industry applications were our patents focused on. To do this, we calculate something called the Revealed Technology Advantage metric, where that score is higher. Australia is more focused and specialized on this area than other areas. It doesn't mean a greater volume, it just means that we're disproportionately focused as a percentage of total activity on this one compared to the other. You can look at the RTA metric, it's described on the OECD website, and it's frequently used by economists to understand specialization by industry. How specialized are we on something? What do we end up with? So we find specialized construction services, all of the tech to do special stuff in the space of housing, construction, building. We're actually pretty specialized on AI for those things. Mineral products manufacturing, that's our mining sector, and mineral ore processing, and like if you look at CSIRO, we've done a huge amount of stuff on patents around mining and minerals with AI. Wood and timber products manufacturing, chemical and chemical product manufacturing. It's dominated by manufacturing as we go down the list, but we do find agriculture and food outcomes in there as well. But you can see anything here with above 1 means we're well above the globe in terms of specializing on it. Detailed data all in the report, and I'd encourage you to have a look. Then we also had a look at the broad categories of research area that our research institutes are publishing on AI. Again, in the same way, this is telling us how, not the volume of what we're doing in these fields, but how specialized we are compared to the rest of the world. And we see veterinary science at the top. We see arts and humanities, and I looked into this, and there's a whole bunch of Australians working on language and linguistics around, large language models, which is quite interesting. Dentistry, although that has a bit of a high error bar. The blue is the error bar. Then mathematics, pharmacology, chemistry, and computer science, and down the list as well. So those graphs that I showed there are aimed to give us a bit of a sense of what are the specializations that are organically forming in our R&D sector in AI. But I will provide, they're not like a total answer to the problem. We capture only a part of patents only capture part of what's going on with product innovation, a small part. And research publishing also, it's about knowledge creation, but again, a lot of knowledge creation is happening that isn't getting put into a research journal. It's just that these are the things we have data on. One of the important things for me out of the research data here is this, that over the 2015 to 2024 decade, Australia accounted for 2.3% of global AI research publications. So think of that as knowledge creation. And given the size of Australia vis-a-vis the US, Chinese, European R&D ecosystems, that's punching above our weight. Where we don't punch above our weight, though, is turning that knowledge into commercial products. Only 0.18% of global AI patent inventions are from Australian inventors. And it's like a trend out of Australia. Like in UNSW invented the solar cells that use in 80% of the world's solar panels. Do we have a solar panel industry? No, we gave it to China. And I think this is playing out in AI as well. And anyone who has studied the innovation and R&D ecosystem in Australia and looked into this quickly finds out this as well. It's that we have incredible knowledge, skills, and capability. We don't turn it into products or industry terribly well. And we also have an overall lower intensity of effort in R&D at 1.6% of GDP. And I think that's part of what we're not maybe reaching critical thresholds to achieve the benefits of it. We are a bit of a let America invent it and we'll use it economy. And I think the evidence is that this is occurring in AI as well. And it's something for us to think about as a nation, about whether we're getting the full benefit of the technologies and the knowledge we have, and creating industries of the future. So then we go on to jobs. Now, jobs is really interesting. We worked with Lightcast data, so they harvest huge amounts of job advertisements across all the different platforms that advertise, and they create an enormous database of this. And we were able to access, we purchased access to that data for this project, and we got 11.3 million job ads, and we screened them ones that were specifically about artificial intelligence. So we had, again, natural language processing approaches and keyword searches as well to say, yeah, this job ad is predominantly an artificial intelligence job. When we got those 73,600 jobs, we asked the question, what skill set do you need to get that job? And we found at the very top of the list wasn't necessarily what we thought. It was communication. Machine learning and artificial intelligence come next, but let's scrub them because you would expect to see those terms in an AI job. Then there was management, your ability to manage resources and people and in an AI project. Then we got Python, which is a programming language, next. And then research, leadership, innovation, problem solving, computer science, data analysis. What is interesting here is the mix of skills. So they say red people have tech skills like Python, data science, machine learning. Blue people do business acumen, communication, management, strategy. I think what this points towards is that the future is owned by the purple person who is able to combine. And I think, this is like, if I look at my CSIRO career, and I've had opportunity for professional development in a couple of spaces, one thing I did was learning Python. I used the Solo Learn app initially, and then I just started creating Python code and making sure I was attending to it every other day, basically, until I was able to code in Python pretty competently. And it's been transformative, and I still think it's a huge skill for where we're going with it. My workflows are effectively using AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude to create Python scripts that are like AI agents that do part of my job for me. And that collection of AI agents is continuing to grow, which is letting me cover more ground more efficiently. But that's not the only professional development I did. The other thing I did back around 2012 was go to NIDA for 2 weeks, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, where I learned theatre presenting, TV presenting, storytelling, in a really interesting and very non-CSIRO-like environment, which was fantastic. I loved it. And it's this sort of red and blue combination that I think is where we want to head for the future. It's a skill set that gets you a job in the AI world. The AI employment story is not a story of just outright, it's a story of growth, but we can see that it's leveled off in terms of both the number of organizations hiring AI workers and the percent of organizations hiring AI workers. It grew a lot, but is starting to level off. And the number of job advertisements too. It grew till around 2022 and took a big jump at the beginning of the pandemic. And the percent of job advertisements grew, but then also leveled off during the pandemic. Concentrated in cities as well. So let's sort of move towards some sum ups here of the AI ecosystem for Australia. So there's a lot more in the report. I'd encourage you to get online and have a look at it. It's heaps of data, and it is starting to show these things. Overall, a rapid growth industry reaching maturity in certain sectors and locations. You know, this specialization is happening, and our traditional industries seem to be the basis for these new AI industries. I have a feeling we are about domain application of AI, and we're seeing some really strong capabilities in Australia, agriculture, mining, but other sectors too that I've covered here, construction potentially, service sector industries too. But I think that we will continue to see these capabilities strengthen and grow, and that'll be relevant on the world stage. We called it a two-track industry. We do see government and industry demand is starting to connect to the AI ecosystem. So increasingly governments and industry are reaching out to startups, and it's a source of frustration that it's not happening more for startups that we picked up on, but they are starting to invest in AI solutions from those startups. I mentioned the emerging specializations and geographic clusters. Our industry is no different to global industry. We're seeing clusters and hubs of concentrated tech capability. Place-based approaches can really help in terms of growing. Employment growth is happening, but it was leveling, and there's diversified skill sets here. The concept of the purple person, it typically is an AI job is often looking for more than just those tech skills, and I actually think we're moving towards this need to define a new skill set about this merged. You know, what is the AI skill set? We used to say code. You know, I've said already, I think coding stays important, but you know, we taught the computer to speak English with these large language models, so you don't need to learn a lot of that tech information. What is it that you're actually needing to get skilled up in to be able to use AI is something that we're starting to understand, but is definitely a different set of skills at play. In Australia, we're more in the space of adopting and applying foundation models built elsewhere. There's not a huge amount of foundation model building going on in Australia. There is I know of 2 cases of large language models being built from Australia, where they're at and how long till they're released and what sort of performances. We'll see what happens. But a lot of the foundation models, the brains, if you like, are being built offshore. Low R&D intensity, we're 1.6% of GDP on R&D, and low levels of product innovation. We don't turn our knowledge into AI products that are commercial and at the same rate other countries would. And I think we can ask questions about why and what might need to be done to change that. So that's the AI ecosystem. I will, while I'm online, mention a course, but a colleague of mine, Dr. Claire Mason from CSIRO, she's a psychologist and she's worked with other psychologists on generative AI, and they've just put together a training course to address this question of the skill set to be able to use AI, as a lot of companies are now, and governments are coming to us with, well, we know we need to use it, we want to do it safely, we want to get it done productively. Well, there is now a training course that is available to do this, and Claire would love to hear from you. Her contact details there. That's Dr. Claire Mason from CSIRO. Overall, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I've given you a quick snapshot of the AI ecosystem, and thank you, Eloise, for the chance to work with you and the team.
Oh, thank you so much, Stefan. So many insights there, and it was a fascinating presentation. I think, as you know, the report has so many insights on, companies, research, and the workforce that it is actually quite hard, isn't it, to present it all in such a short time. So you did an amazing job. Look, I've got questions, and there's a few questions in the chat. So I'm going to actually start with one of the ones from the chat, and then I'll go to one of mine. Wilhelmina has asked about whether we'll be making recommendations for education across different types of skills, and noting that there've been, major cuts in humanities, communication, arts and design education. Look, just quickly on that one before I hand to you, Stefan. When I think about the skills that we'll need in regards to AI, I mean, you touched on it in your presentation, Stefan, but I think as well, we're really going to be looking for how people can actually understand AI and work with it, work collaboratively with it and guide it, ensure that the outputs and the decisions that you're checking them, you're understanding how they're made. So for me, it's that collaborative guiding nature of working with AI. But did you have anything else to add on that, Stefan?
Yeah, thanks very much. Look, so CSIRO seldom makes recommendations on anything. We seek to explore, to explain, to try and help people understand so they can make decisions. But we tend to like to shy away from saying what Australia should or ought to. That's your choice. But we can make comments on things and provide insights. The arts and humanities have so much to offer Australia and the world. Anyone who looks at this tech revolution has got to be truthful enough to accept that how humans are interacting with it and the effect it has on our society, our teenagers, and how people think really important. And I think probably a space where a lot more could be done. And so I think let's look at that. The other thing is, long-term forecasting of job demand is something we almost always get wrong. Let's let markets do what they do. Let's not try and push people in particular directions too much. Let's just keep informing ourselves, thinking about plausible futures. But I've got children in school. My son's just started uni. My daughter's in grade 10. Would I try and tell them do or do not do arts and humanities, go into engineering, don't do engineering? I wouldn't, ever. I would rather sort of start to say about how the world is changing, the sorts of skill sets, the concept of the purple person. But the jobs are going to change a lot. Spreadsheets didn't kill off accountants; it just made them faster and better at their jobs. There's a lot of that going to go on with artificial intelligence as well. So I think it's a fascinating space. It's one we need to think about. It's one we want to make sure Australian workers get the best possible outcomes here, and that'll be good for Australian industry. But I'm one to let market forces, and people's own curiosity and desires in their own careers to take shape and drive where they want to go. If you're interested in English literature, go and study English literature at university. There's going to be a lot of things that you can contribute to the world. If you're interested in STEM and mathematics and coding, you can do that as well. But critically, you can do both. And maybe we need university degrees that respond to that a bit more.
Thank you, Stefan. Look, just a question that I had. I noticed in the report that, it highlights significant AI integration across energy, resources and healthcare in Australia. And these are sectors where Australia has been historically strong in terms of the economy. So, for example, in health, we've got world-class research, we've got strong clinical systems, and there's a demand for, better patient care and drug discovery. So my question is, how do you see AI shaping these sectors where in ways that could set us apart globally?
Yeah, so let's take health, right? Health is just under so much demand, it's increasing, and it's already kind of breaking at the seams at the moment. We have ambulance ramping, we have a lot of people unable to get surgery they need. The healthcare system just does not have the capacity to respond to current need, but all projections are, with an aging population, that demand is going to increase and grow really quickly, and budgets are fiscally constrained for most governments across Australia. AI is going to be a critical part of what we use in health to enable us to have healthcare services in the future. Now, I'm not going to say there's a simple button we push to get those benefits. AI adoption in healthcare is going to be really challenging, like everywhere else, but done well. If we work hard at it and cleverly at it, we have a healthcare system that operates. But it also creates an ability to solve this problem and then respond to global export markets. When I wrote the 2019 roadmap, my view was there were 3 areas that we wanted to look into at the time: AI for the great outdoors, mining, agriculture, fishing, forestry, environment, AI for built environment and AI for health and aging. And it was based on the logic of fix a big problem at home, but then export the AI solutions globally. And I also am a believer in specialization. I think that, yes, this idea, can you pick winners? No, you can't. And some people say just make it, support everything, and the market will work out what is the winning specialization. I don't think it really works like that. I think the evidence of success is where industry, government, communities come together, and they have got to, yes, support everything, but they also have a bit of a clear view of where we specialize. So I think health would be one of those spaces, and I think we get more information from this next ecosystem report. But I do want to say is, like, we haven't answered that question with the data, and this is, I'm in a data scientist in a data organization. I don't think data answers all these questions. There's reasoning, there's logic, there's thinking about the best way to go. In some ways, I think that the work I did in the roadmap was less data informed because we didn't have the data, but it had richness in other ways, and we should bring that into it as well. I think we should be looking at areas of specialization and trying to target those, supporting the ecosystem overall at the same time, and also just that stick close to solving problems. Yeah, and in health there's a lot, education too.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Look, I guess, I want to ask what the biggest shift is from the last time we published this report in late 2023 till now. I mean, obviously there was more AI companies, there was, stronger research output and job growth, but was there something in there that, what did you find to be the most interesting shift?
I think it was the difficulty we had in defining an AI company and drawing that boundary around them, because the incredible growth over that 2-year period of the use of AI, how Australian companies have gone beyond just innovating with it, with a lot of them now, what was an AI experiment in 2023 for the company became the company by 2025, and we were picking them up, hence from 500 to 1500. And I think that is absolutely happening. There's so much going on in the Australian AI ecosystem, and then if we look into companies like the Commonwealth Bank and Coles were not in the AI list of AI companies, but crikey, a lot of AI adoption has gone on in these companies, huge amounts. Working recently in the insurance sector, I think we're about to see some of our really big insurers massively ramp up the use of AI in an ethical way, and to try and do it to improve customer outcomes, speed up claims and so forth. But I think that's about to hit us. So that's what really strikes me is that there's no way Australian companies were just sitting on their hands and watching this. Some startups were, at the time we were doing it, were experimenting with AI as part of what they were doing. And then by 2025, that was the company. And I think if you look into the list, you find a lot of it. And then we look into our large ASX companies, hugely about it. And then let's look at our tech companies too. WiseTech, Atlassian, Technology One. AI is really big, to where they've cut. Some of these companies have just experienced growth and growth and growth. Canva would be another one. And AI is now just part of the fabric of how they create. They're kind of becoming like AI first companies. And I think let's watch this space. But it might be that we talk less about AI because of its ubiquity in another few years' time.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Look, I have a technical question from John.
Right.
He is asking, when a model excels on a benchmark, to what extent is it success because it knows the answer to that specific question? And if that question is changed slightly, can the model reason its way to the correct answer?
Good question, John. So I think the thing here is about the benchmarks that we see. Absolutely. Once the benchmarks are out there and published, all of the model making companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, X, all of them, Meta as well, they start to design the models to ensure they meet these benchmarks, because when they publish the model, they want to make it look as good as possible against the benchmarks. So it's not an entirely fair test because they've kind of been given the questions in advance. No, the model hasn't been given the questions in advance, but the people designing the model have been working on it to get these sorts of outcomes. There ain't no real benchmark other than how the model goes in the real world and how it gets used to problem solve and do things. And I think that's the only actual test of an AI model. Having said that, I think we are seeing AI pass the test of business application in complex problems and business processes again and again and again. You know, like again in the insurance sector that we've done some work on recently. Yeah, it's there. It's been tested a lot in the sort of testing environment, and it just continues to work and perform very well at what it's doing, with some caveats, with the need for guardrails, with the need for guidelines around it, but it's passing the test of real world application as well. But that's a much more complex benchmark, but it's the one that really matters.
Thank you, Stefan. John, I hope that answers your question. Look, one more question in the chat, which I'll address, and then we'll wrap up. So thank you so much, Stefan, again, for your presentation and for your insights. It's been amazing talking to you as usual. Now, just the last question we have from Peter. Peter Suck is from the Good Ancestors and is talking about the Good Ancestors AI stress test and asking if new standards will address the risks raised by that stress test. I will certainly check that out, Peter. But what I can say about that is that regulation, AI regulation is a matter for the Australian government, for Cabinet to consider. But what they have committed to is ensuring that Australia has an environment that facilitates innovation while mitigating harms. So, and our role at the National AI Centre is to support this by giving Australians, industry guidance and tools to adopt AI safely, while also securing those productivity benefits. Right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I just have a couple more quick wrap-up slides to go through. Just want to, again, thank you, Stefan, for your time and your incredible work on the report, and also a big thank you to your research team, including Alexandra, the other co-lead. I encourage everyone to go and look deeper at that report. It has so many insights in it, so please have a read when you have some time. Just wanted to highlight a few things coming up for the National AI Centre. We have AI Week this year coming up the week of the 20th of October. That is going to actually focus on AI hacks for work and life. So we're going to be sharing stories and asking you to share your stories about how you use AI to supercharge your work and to supercharge your life. So stay tuned for that one. We'll be reaching out soon. During AI Week, we'll have our flagship event called the Leadership Summit in Brisbane this year on the 21st and 22nd of October. So save the date. You can actually go in and get your tickets to that now. So that's going to be 2 full days of talking about building trust and confidence in AI. So with some really interesting speakers as well. And our next webinar is actually coming up in September. It is around what I talked about earlier about the Responsible AI Index that was released yesterday. So they'll go through that index and also talk about the self-assessment tool as well. So thank you, everyone, for attending and learning more about Australia's AI ecosystem. We love that there's so much interest in these webinars. To stay in touch with us, look, the best way to do that is actually to subscribe to our newsletter. You'll hear about all our events and all our releases and all of our guidance, but also follow us on LinkedIn and join the conversation during AI Week as well. So we really look forward to hearing your stories during that time. But thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us, and enjoy your day.